New album that has just been released is Seed by Freedom to Glide, the final part of their trilogy about war and armed conflict. It really is a magnificent album, as I said earlier on, and I'm delighted that Andy Nixon and Pete Riley, the men behind Freedom to Glide, are here with me in the HFM studio this evening. Pete, Andy, welcome.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Good, I can hear you both very clearly. That's good to start with. So the three albums you've released as Freedom to Glide are called Rain, which is very appropriate in the current weather, Fall, and now Seed. They're simple, straightforward titles. So what does each of those words signify to you?
Well, the first one, Rain, came from the first idea I think that we had together, which was, actually it was a quote from Pete himself, who said to me one day, I just wanted this song to sound like soldiers falling like rain on the battlefield, and that was the beginning, I think, of Freedom to Glide right there.
And Fall?
Fall. What do you think, Pete?
we just tried. In actual fact, we came with the idea that we wanted to have the song titles just to have four letters. So likewise with Seed as well. So what we did was we thought to ourselves, well, what would be appropriate for the next album? And Fall, in reality, was relating yet again to soldiers falling on battlefields and things. So it is that sort of war theme going throughout.
And Seed?
And Seed, that's...
Well, it was the third four-letter word, if you like.
Yes.
Where did it come from?
We're just hoping for a seed of hope that all that will stop. The trilogy is actually, in our minds, an anti-war trilogy. It's our message about stopping war. So Fall, Rain, and Seed. So there you go.
It gives it a bit of an open end, Seed. It's like a seed of hope.
Yeah. So how long did this album take to complete from start to finish compared to the previous two?
They've all been pretty similar, actually. We've done one every 3 years.
Yeah.
So really, getting down to the nitty-gritty, probably looking at about 2 years, a hard slog for each one, because there's a heck of a lot of promo to do at the end of each album, so you get wound up in that for a good long while before you start the second one, or the third, in fact. Yeah,
but there is actually a song on this album that was written during the rain season, as it were. So it didn't make it onto Rain, didn't make it onto Fall, but we decided it would fit really well for Seed, so we'll probably mention that later. Okay.
Well, this new album differs from Rain and Fall in that several of the songs are interconnected. They're about a soldier allowed home on leave in the final year of World War I. So why did you decide to follow a single narrative thread this time?
It came from an idea. I was writing some songs at the beginning of this whole process that all seemed to be connected, and I had this idea which I was kind of waiting to formulate into something before I sort of put it to Pete, and it was that I saw a little chapter within the album devoted to a single person, focusing on one life at the end of the war in 1918. Can you remember that conversation? Because it kind of pricked both of our ears up, and it was a nice idea, and we kind of carried on with the rest of the album, but it just kept growing and growing, and it became the whole album. So every song on that album is about the same guy from start to finish.
I mean, I think focusing on the thoughts and reflections of a single individual gives this album an added power and poignancy. Absolutely. Now, is that part of the reason why you chose to do it this way?
I think so, yeah. It wasn't planned that way, and I don't think the initial thoughts were that, but as it progressed and evolved from that initial seed, if you like, the power of it all sort of became very apparent very quickly, and it just sort of, we just got drawn in by it, and that had to be the concept. And when this guy was brought to life, we had to give him a name and then a family, and he had to have a wife, kids, and it just became this character that just became part of the whole. It became part of us, really.
Not just that, it's the fact that we've read quite a lot about war diaries, and there's all sorts of information you can find online or in books, and we just wanted to actually give this character some sort of recognition, in a sense. It's not actually about anybody in particular, it's just a fictional character, but it could be anybody, and it could be on any side of the lines. It could be a German soldier, it could be a British soldier, a Canadian soldier, or an American, French soldier. It could be anybody.
In the story, though, he comes across a German doctor helping a soldier back to safety. So you've tied your story into the real story of your grandfather, Pete, Corporal Robert Wilson, I should mention his name, which sort of brings things back full circle to where you started from.
Yeah, it does in a sense. And once you listen to the album, you will hear reference to rain in there quite a lot as well. So we were conscious about the fact that the trilogy needed to have a finale, as it were. This particular album, it fits very nicely in with the other two albums, and it was meant to.
You say that in the promotional text for the album that the two men, your character and the German doctor, talk and find a mutual respect for one another as the futility of war stares them in the face, just quoting. Of course, the real German doctor told your grandfather, Pete, that he was there to save lives, not to take them.
Yes.
But they were never able to have the kind of lengthy conversation that your fictional soldier does, were they?
No, this is, in fact, the doctor that saved my grandfather's life was quickly whisked away and sent to a prisoner of war camp. So we don't know who he is. We never found out a name or anything. My granddad never knew his name. He was badly injured, so he didn't have a chance to have a conversation. So this, in a sense, is probably looking at what could have happened if they did manage to have that conversation.
I mean, how many books and articles have you read? How many films and video clips have you watched over the course of creating your various albums, your EPs and Christmas songs that you've done as well?
How many? Countless. Hundreds, probably. What's been wonderful for me is just reading stuff to research, to write lyrics. And you discover poetry, and they're just incredible. Books, first-hand accounts of the real thing, the real thing that get to the nitty-gritty of it all, and they're so inspiring that it'll kick off another idea for another song. I will carry on forever reading this stuff because it's enthralling.
Okay, I'm going to give Andy and Pete a break in a moment and play you one of the songs from Seed, and this song is called Undertones of War. Now, would one of you just like to tell us a little about this one?
It's the title, Undertones of War, comes from a book written by, funny enough, one of those war poets, Edmund Blunden. And I thoroughly recommend it. It's very hard work to read, but it's basically based around a part of the story that he writes about in the book. And I just like the sound of the title, Undertones of War. That's pretty much it. It goes a lot deeper than that, but we haven't got time.
Okay then. Well, coming up next, Freedom to Glide and Undertones of War. You're listening to 102.3 HFM.
Between the faces of the trenches to the front line, familiar exchanges of the bullets and the 5.9s pull me back to this world like a stone into the water. All the new and nervous faces will soon be acquainted with the slaughter. We face each other in this pouring rain. Still we pay with lives for every inch we gain. Still we wonder if our lives could ever be the same. While the undertones of war seep into the very core. Between the faces of the trenches to the front line, the familiar exchanges of the bullets and the 5.9s, they pull me back to this world like a stone into the water. All the new and nervous faces soon be acquainted with the slaughter. Face each other in this pouring rain. Still we pay with lives for every inch we gain. Still we wonder if our lives could ever be the same.
was Undertones of War, a track from the new Freedom to Glide album Seed, the concluding part of a trilogy about war and armed conflict that they've been working on for the past few years. And Andy Nixon and Pete Riley are my special studio guests this evening. So I've got a question from a listener called Colin, who says, wow, what an excellent album. And he wants to know, chaps, whether you record together or remotely, exchanging songs or stems of music with each other. That's a quote from his question.
Well, thank you, Colin, first of all.
Yeah, thanks.
We live 40 miles apart, so it's quite hard to get together often enough to record in a studio together. So we do pretty much everything remotely and send a lot of files back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's how it works, really.
We had a bit of fun... well, it was quite a few months back now, because obviously while we were writing the album, but I brought the Seaboard Rise over to Andy's studio, and we were having a bit of fun with that, and added some of that to the to one of the songs, and it's something that I think we'll probably want to do a little bit more of, actually get together more. The ideas we discuss a lot, so the phones are red hot all the time, but getting together and actually sitting together and playing together is something that we've done in bands live before, but it'd be nice to do that in the studio as well, so that, watch this space.
Now, whenever I finish a special piece of work or a project, I often feel pretty flat immediately afterwards. So what are your feelings now that the final song's been recorded and the last part of the trilogy is now out there?
Right now, you kind of have to just switch off, and it goes to pressing, not depressing, to pressing. And when it comes back and then you release it, then it all starts to kick off. It just becomes this euphoric kind of experience where, thankfully, that everybody thinks it's amazing.
Yeah, we seem to have a problem with trying to stop, as it were, because you never want to stop. You always want to continue and finish something, make it the best it possibly can. And sometimes you've just got to draw a line. You've got to release it at some point. So at that point, we're thinking, are we happy with this? Are we happy with that? And eventually you've got to say, yes, we are, we've got to do it. And that's where the drop happens, isn't it?
We give ourselves a date, and then we announce it, and then that's it. You have to follow it.
Well, that all leads me nicely into my next question, which is that you began Freedom to Glide with the Rain EP, which is almost exactly 7 years ago. So do you think you've said everything you want to say on this subject now?
You can never say enough, I don't think, on this subject.
I could quite happily carry on for the rest of my life doing this concept, but it would get boring, I think, after a while for the listener. So we will be moving on to something else at some point. We don't know what it is yet, no.
Okay, well, a slightly harder question then. How has your attitudes towards war and the way wars were and are prosecuted changed over the years of working on these albums?
It's focused the mind on that. Certainly for me anyway, it's made me sort of think a lot more about the humanity aspect of it. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a tough one. Have you got anything to chip in there?
It's not changed my attitude at all.
No, it hasn't changed my attitude.
I just think war is wrong, and it's been a dream for me to actually make that, make that into music and give a message to people of my thoughts on war. It's dreadful. It shouldn't happen. Why do people not actually find other ways of sorting out the disputes? And it's always the common man that suffers. The people that have the arguments at the very top, they don't suffer because they're the ones that don't get shot at. It's the people below that get all the punishment, and it's just wrong.
Well, you mentioned the common man. I mean, one of the most moving parts of last week's D-Day commemoration was the Prime Minister reading a letter from a soldier to his family written 2 days before his death in the Normandy landings. Now, you've something similar on Seed, a song called Dear May. Now, how hard was it to put yourself in the mind of someone in that situation and get the tone just right with the lyrics and the music for that one?
It's incredibly hard, and you have to be very lucky, I think, to get there. And I certainly felt lucky to get where I wrote the lyrics to that song. And you have to be really, really honest when you're doing something like this, and you have to be really respectful, and you have to just give it everything you've got, and you have to get really down into your heart and really think and imagine how that must feel. And it pulls the best out of you. It absolutely does. There was a time Pete came over to my house, and I had these lyrics that I was very pleased with, and I could hardly read them. Do you remember that?
I do.
It was choking me up every time I tried, because you just get inside it so much that
Yeah, we actually had. We got together in the studio as well to listen through a lot of the music and just work out what tweaks needed to be made and stuff like that. And we got to Dear May, and that's shortly followed by Seed of Hope. And I've got to be honest, I actually had tears in my eyes listening to it, even though we produced this music. But the lyrics, it was so moving.
Well, you mentioned Seed of Hope. I mean, it is sung by your friend Louise Wilson from the Leicestershire band Kafka Diva. We must mention them. It's only 1 minute and 8 lines long. But why did you ask Louise to do the vocal for what is effectively your final statement on the subject of war?
It just seemed so fitting, so right to do that, to let the wife of the soldier have the last say. Yeah. And I can't really explain it more than that. It just felt the way that's the way it should be, and Louise was the only person for the job.
When I first heard it, I thought she was a representation of the mother of all soldiers, but you say it's the wife's perspective.
Well, it's whatever you want it to be. At the end of the day, it's perceived the way it's perceived, and whatever you get out of it. And
yeah, sometimes if we actually explain it too much, it takes away the beauty of what people see in their own mind's eye with the music. We like to try and create a cinematic feel to the music, which would then everybody would have their individual take on that. But our take was that it would be his wife. She's read the letter, and it's her last words about the whole situation, and basically quite a moving end to the whole trilogy.
I would actually call it a masterstroke, and if anybody hears the album, I'm sure you'll agree with me. I've just got a few minutes to go to the end of the interview, and I'm going to play a track then called The Space Between the Lines, which I think is one of the most powerful that you've ever written since you've been working on this. So just tell us a little about that song.
I can tell you how it started. It started about 2, 3, maybe even more years ago. There was a demo that Pete sent of this fabulous piano. And it sat on the hard disk, basically, in a folder.
We call it the folder of ore.
The folder of ore. That's just our thing. I knew there was something in that song. I always knew it, but there was never a right time for it. And then within this concept, it was the last song to be written, actually, wasn't it?
We delayed the album because of it.
Yeah. There was a part in the middle that needed something where the soldier had to be contemplating what he was up against. And I remember the atmosphere that it produces, and that's where that song came from. The original piano, the demo is what you hear.
Yeah,
it didn't have to be changed at all. And it's just that atmosphere that piano is producing was just perfect for that song and that sentiment.
We've got a fantastic idea for a video for this as well, but it's quite big in the sense that we wouldn't be able to afford to do it, even though we do produce our own videos. So, Guy Ritchie, if you're listening, I'm sure you've listened regularly to the show. Get in touch.
Yeah, come on, Guy.
Okay, then finally, chaps, I know the end of this trilogy isn't the end of the Freedom to Glide story by any means, so how do you see the band's future? What's coming next, if you can tell us anything about what you've got
more
in
music.
mind?
Yeah, always more music. We will keep releasing stuff. We've got some ideas.
Yeah, we've got
loads of ideas.
We've got loads of ideas. We've actually got an idea for something that we may release in the near future. So it probably isn't miles and miles away from where we're at the moment, but watch this space. We've got some interesting and hopefully sort of ear-worthy music to come. So.
Ear-worthy, I like that.
Okay, Pete Riley, Andy Nixon, thank you very much for joining me on The Last Outpost. I wish you all the best with this new album, which is one of the best I've heard this year. The band's website is freedomtoglide.com. You can stream and buy Seed from their Bandcamp page, and there's an excellent video for Broken Road, one of the tracks from the album, on YouTube.
Truth and can't escape the sound that echoes through my mind. No answer could be found. In the space between the lines, and the watchers gaze as the sun is on the rise for any sign of life between the lines. This pouring rain.